Greetings. My name is Michael Miller, and this is a Michael Miller trademark training video out to you because you're watching. Thank you and welcome. It's meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates, the Core New Core. And when I look through my magic mirror to see my patrons, I see Clayton and Ruby and Stephanie and Jonathan, and I welcome them. And I welcome you if you're interested in how to survive as a Pilates instructor, even thrive as one, or the same if you're a student of it without worried about trying to teach it. 5 things. 5 things. I was just going to have a cold open and do this. Faster, maybe. Like the titles of the Star Wars movie as it goes behind you. Right? So, my number one title is a set of dates, years. In this year, 1800, is the source of the quote on Joe's wall. And this is the book he wrote in 1945. So from 1800 to 1945, to 1980, to the year 2000. Okay. Those are the numbers in my title. Those are the books in which publications happen that matter to Pilates, to your understanding of Pilates. 1880 was a quote from a play that Joe had hanging on his wall. It is the soul which builds itself a body. Although I don't think that was in his book in 1945. And then 35 years later, I guess I have to keep these on my lap so I can hold them up for reference. First, 1800, the quote on Joe's wall. Then 145 years later, Joe writes his book. Okay, he wasn't that old, he wasn't around when Schiller wrote the play. Okay. I believe he was born around 1880. 1945. And then 13 years after he died, Freeman and Eisen come out with a book, evidently heavily inspired by Ramana. And this is the source of the predominant point of view of Pilates in the world today. Because in their effort to describe something they couldn't explain, they made attributions of principles. And then this is my book in the year 2000 that points to an ideal. So if you're just showing up and you want to know the lay of the land, know that for whatever they couldn't make out of this book, this was a book and overseen by Ramana, where principles are presented in lieu of an explanation. I say in lieu of because they admit that they came up with the principles for for what they could not explain. "20 years later, MMP comes out, yours truly, with a point of view that seeks to make an explanation based on Joe's work." Right? Not knowing him, none of that, just from what Joe wrote, here's what you can look at or find as a point of view of Pilates. Number 2, I saw a very capable demonstrator, performer, on what amounted to a long box, a bench, in prone, right? And had a very straight neck. Had a very straight neck. You know, easy to say nice line on the neck, right? But the palms were down. To me, showing an absence of the engagement you're after in core nu tension between the shoulders and the ears. Therefore, the line in the neck, as straight as it is, and I'm happy for however it gets to that point. If I were to crawl right through the screen and become the instructor, I would say palms up. Right? Now, as you try to keep palms up or be rotating out your arms, see, it's about core nu tension. But I would see where palms up went. Because where you're after is to be able to make core nu tension straight out your spine through the crown of your head, and the shoulder engagement is part of that. To maintain that engagement when your arms come down to your sides, from core nu tension takes me to palms. Now I'm all confused based on what I saw and what I'm saying. I know I'm headed toward core nu tension, ears to shoulders. Would take palms up in the effort, down, palms down feels like a straight line through the neck, out the crown of the head, without the engagement of core nu tension. And because this is about CT and MMP, if I were crawling through the screen, I'd want palms to be reaching up to get external rotation at the shoulders. I may end up turning the palm over, but not until after the openness of the shoulders was there to allow engagement of core nu tension between the shoulders and the ears. And to engage in creating tension, creating decompression through the tension that's created. Core nu tension is in its nature decompressive, eccentric. It's because when you tighten your grip at any two places that are connected, all of the excess coming out of the deepening of the grip has to go somewhere. when your grip gets deeper, you end up with more length. And so the length between the two grips that are connected, but in their engagement of rotation, stretch them apart. What am I talking about, number 2? Oh, so I'm talking about core nu tension. And I'm talking about palms being up rather than down. To be a core nu tension for a line that you create. It's a MMP thing. Well, actually, it's a core nu tension thing, and it doesn't mean that you have to be engaged that way at all. Okay, so in connection with number 2, knowing about this image and knowing that it represents oppositional rotation between axes in your body, okay? I'm trying to line up the banner with the camera, because unless I've screwed up the banner, I don't know. Me, in my mind, saying to you, you're thinking, if you are aware of, you have knowledge of this way of engaging in your body, right? You can use that knowledge. Knowing gives your imagination inspiration. That's what I wanted to say in my notes. Knowing gives your imagination inspiration. And it's inspiration to make oppositional rotation between axes, which gives you a sensation of alignment by virtue of the tension between the endpoints. Endpoints being the axis, the end of the axes that the body has capability of making rotational dynamic around. Actually, I said that backwards, really. The body can make rotational dynamic, and in so doing establishes the axis that it's trying to gain more control of by deepening its grip, by gaining a tighter core, right? By deepening your core. That old deepening is a deepening toward the axis of rotation that you're seeking to control. By deepening your grip, you get more control around the axis that the grip establishes. Did I say that okay? So my supplemental comment on that then is, you imagine core nu to engage, right? Your knowledge of core nu, what I'm here sharing with you is knowledge and that this matters in a way, and your knowledge of that empowers you to engage your musculature in a way that distributes the load of your body and provides a sensation of alignment between the endpoints that are engaged. All right, let's move on. Number three. Let's see what you're really made of. Show me your 1 rep mat. Usually that's not a question, and I don't mean it in an antagonistic way. I mean it as in a way of, here you are as supposedly the pro from out of town, and someone has been in a training program for, say, a year or more, and at the point where they're testing out and they're looking to be tested by you. Well, if you know these three things of Joe, right out of Joe's book, especially the hardest of the three things to memorize and keep in order and be able to do is the sequence itself, is the mat. The mat is the method. And insofar as it's meant to be done without stopping, which then necessarily means flowing from one exercise to the next, then doing a mat performance, doing the mat, with only one repetition of each exercise and staying in flow is definitely a barometer of showing the depth of what you have going for you in your ability to do the mat. And I hadn't asked for that more than twice in different states or countries when it, for me, became, I guess I became known for it, looking for the 1-rep mat. And why is that? That's because you really have to know the sequence in your head in order to flow through 34 exercises all in a row. And only do 1 rep of each, and then do each rep engaging in the tension you're after and the pursuit of the control you hope to demonstrate. So if you're yawning at all you know about and everything you can do with Pilates, be sure you include your ability to do a 1-rep mat, because it's a direct reflection on how well you have in hand the order of the exercises, because that plays heavily into your ability then to express the exercises, to know what comes next. Number 4. I just like the title more than I had much to say about it, but in doing the mat, in pursuing the state of being in the body in the moment of the doing, in pursuing contrology, in pursuing the experience while performing the mat, there's something about resonance that happens, or familiarity that is required to get any depth of effort in Pilates. You need to be familiar with what you're doing and what you're reaching for and how to reach for it, and just on a lot of different levels. This whole thing of diving in, just standing on the shore, signing the waivers and going and putting down a history and having a doctor's permission and all the things you go through in order to get to try to dive in is often because you're there, often because you're in pain and you want out. So the instructor has to absorb an issue-oriented student in the pursuit of a whole body experience. Because in the pursuit of the whole body experience, what happens is the issue dissolves away to the point where you forget about why you showed up, because you don't even want to remember not being perfect, having limitation or injury that kept you from doing whatever you want. Right? It's this whole thing about being real and having a body that much of our self-image likes to ignore or forget about. Why? Because it's painful. So this vibe that we're after, this experience that we're after, it varies in degree and extent and duration, especially duration. It's like striking a tuning fork, and the more regularly you strike it, the better the effect is, the better the effect is. In terms of your ability to do the exercises, you get better and stronger. And then in doing them, you find more focus, so you go deeper. It's like any other practice, it takes practice. And in the practicing, in the MMP point of view, you're after resonating with what it takes to achieve the experience, a coordination of being, thinking, and observing. It's not rocket science. It's nothing beyond what you can't carve up the body and point to the pieces and say, these pieces are what we're trying to completely coordinate. And from the MMP point of view, that coordination results in an experience. Right? So it's a state of being in the body in the moment of the doing, and perhaps that's the experience or one way to describe it. But it's the coordinating of capacities, being as the body, thinking as the prefrontal cortex, and spirit as the amygdala and hippocampus. Parts of the brain that feed information into the thinking. And those parts of the brain are connected to what it's like out there, right? Out there. So as an instructor, you're really just looking to I don't have a thing, but I have a bell. You're looking to create a vibration that comes in the pursuit of the performance. I mean, it's the performance, it's the doing of that performance. Uniform, eccentric loading, flowing through progressive patterns of movement. The closer that is to the actual mat, the better. But the further away it is, because of the individual in pursuit of what's there, so that's the key point. That the experience that you're reaching for your student to have as an instructor, or that you're looking to disappear into as the student, fades. It's elusive. It doesn't last. And yet the attempts at doing it, when you do Pilates, you turn to yourself to make such a concise effort at control that you're connecting yourself to make more control, meaning you're listening, you're in that corrective feedback loop. Even though you come out of that effort, what really resonates is that frequency. What frequency is that? The frequency of complete coordination of being, thinking, and observing. MMP looks at that as an experience. And as something would be a vibration, right? Like thunder and lightning are both frequencies at different parts of the spectrum. So maybe when I hear being all abstract and everything, but I guess, all right, let me try this again. So some inspiration from Joe, 1800, a quote out of a play. Then Joe himself writes his book that the MMP point of view is based on, 1945. Then 35 years later, 13 years after Joe dies, Gail Eisen and Philip Friedman, with Ramana's help, come out with this book, 1980. Okay, so from 35 years after Joe wrote his book, 13 years after he died. So this was a fading memory from Ramana, 1980. And yet, if you just showed up to this whole world of Pilates, this book became the catalyst to pursuing Pilates without understanding anything more than a vague description based up on their made-up principles to point to something they couldn't explain. And that's the state of Pilates in 2019, by and large. Not you and not me and none of the network of people that have had any exposure to my work, no matter what they think of it or how they view it. So, coming up on 20 years since my effort to point to an interpretation that comes from Joe's original book. Okay with that? See that? Why is Joe pictured this way? Because since boxing, which was early in England, you have others document that, but he had a glass eye. And see, often that isn't referred to at all. And you think of a person, a survivor, think of Joseph Pilates, coming from a place where, he had one eye. And yet, by his own documentation of his own film, the mat exercises and the order that they are in are the same in both films, 40 years apart. That's one of the reasons the sequence is so important to the point of view of MMP. Because if it mattered that much to him that it didn't evolve, it was what it was, and meant to be kept as it is, at least by him. You're going to now tell me that Joe would have evolved it if he were still alive, and that's all you're doing? Well, recognize what you're evolving and what didn't evolve in Joe's time and certainly won't evolve in yours and my time. Even if you're there in 30-30 or way out there in 40-40. Here's see, for all of you that grew up in an era where this was the only book available, and not many had access to it, and most of Pilates was being taught word of mouth, right, in very small circles of people, because that was the only people that were interested in it for the most part, right? But as the interest showed up, this was the book and point of view that nourished most of the world, and yet now it's getting, the roots of this book are the basis of what people know Pilates to be. If that book doesn't answer your questions, and that comes from Ramana, who's the main disciple of Joe's, his ingenue, if you will, as he wrote, if that's the best she could do is point to principles, then up to everyone else to reach beyond that, not just to take that as Pilates being undescribable. That won't hold up. It doesn't hold up for me, and for all the big money that's coming in that wants to actually have a reason for why they're investing the money that they're investing. They want to know something. They want more knowing beyond the comfort zone of principles and the unknown. Joe's book, MMP, takes Joe's words, his definition, his promise, and his sequence to get to an experience that comes out of the pursuit of the ideal, obvious within his choreography, within his sequence. If you love what you're doing, but you just want to be able to defend it better as to what makes it what it is, if you want an ideal explanation, think of this. If it's an ideal explanation, then whatever you make of the ideal is still whatever you're making of it. And the fact that it's an ideal defends it from abrogation and surreptition from self-serving influences. So look, those books are real, but your perspective is up to you to make it out. And if you're really entrenched in Pilates as the aristocratic culture that it has grown up from or into, and always been, you will always have that. That will always be part of who you are within the tapestry of the Pilates culture. Because I'm not the only one and you're listening, that makes two of us. Because I am the only one and yet you are listening and others have. And so there's more than one out there that has a point of view that goes beyond Ramana's best take on principles. The MMP point of view reaches right back to Joe and takes Joe at his word. And gets to an experience, gets to something that you can actually feel. So, it's not hard, right? If I can get to this, because I'm no brainiac, I'm more observing oriented than thinking capable. But what matters to the instructor is, regardless of the capacities within the student, the magic is when you create the coordination of the three, not the two, not body, mind, and more mind, but of the three. If I can do this, anybody can do this. And to the extent that I'm trying to broadcast and lead as I can, it's up to you to lead as you can. So lead the way in what you know. And I don't think you will or you want to until at some point, just in your own sharing and your own teaching or your own exploration, you find the transcendency in what you know compared to the common knowledge point of view. And seeing yet what's not to get. What's not to get? Gosh. I would be so excited to just be able to leap into an understanding of not only Pilates and what it is, but know about core nutension and what it does. Life can't live forever. Better catch up, read between the lines, see behind the curtain, get a handle on CT and MMP, because by 30-30 you'll be considered pretty backward if you don't know about CT, and by the year 40-40, because of CT's situation, or the awareness of CT within common knowledge, right? It'll move this point of view of Pilates, which is just one out of millions, but this point of view out of Pilates, it's one you want to be aware of, in my opinion, and that's why I broadcast it. Life can't live forever. Read between the lines, see behind the curtain, evaluate points of view, and then add 2 and 2, because it's up to you to direct your thinking. Geist.